Welcome to UFHL Now! A close-up look at the ultimate fantasy hockey league. The most realistic fantasy gameplay. High stakes. High reward. Here's your host, the owner of Duckman's domination in the UFHL, and the mighty Mallards of the UFAHL, Dean Millard.
Hello there, and welcome to another episode of UFHL Now, proudly broadcast on the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. If you want to get in touch with us because you think you have a show that would fit nicely on the network, please do. You can find on Twitter at UFS Network, or you can send an email, UFSN at UFFsports.com. And if you feel like following these guys, Duckman's domination of the UFHL, it's at Ducks Domination on Twitter. We have an awesome show lined up for you as per usual. I'd like to thank our sponsor of UFHL, Instat. Right there, you can find out just about everything you need to know about Shane Wright, who is property of high-level scouting within the UFHL world. So big thanks to Instat. All of our franchises get this incredible tool thanks to them, as well as Fantalytica and Elite Prospects, some great sponsors that we have here in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League. You can watch all kinds of video with these tools. It's incredible. On the show today, the UFWJ, Ultimate Fantasy World Junior, officially announced. We'll recap all the rule changes that happened this offseason as the season is 12 days away. Recapping that. Trade block for some teams. We'll also look at some NHL roster moves that have impacted some teams. Some in a very happy way. Some will be very happy about it. Some are losing players, unfortunately, because they're heading overseas, and that's the way it goes in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League. We have to react to what happens in the big leagues, and it always makes you have to be creative or be one step ahead of the game. And you might not like this, but I will give you the duck call a little bit later on in the show. But the man that everybody has come to see, UFHL Insider Larry Fisher, has the goods on everything coming up right now on UFHL Now.
Time to get the scoop on the UFHL with our insider, Larry Fisher. He's had lines in the water all week long. What will he reel in for us today? Let's dive in and find out what's going on with the UFHL now.
All right, bringing in the insider now, Larry Fisher, as, man, we are getting so close to the start of the season. I almost think next year we should almost get a UFHL advent calendar so that on a different day of the year you can open and you have another logo there or something like that of another team. I mean, it's really is exciting and lots of changes along the way. And, you know, something else that, the start of the season, Larry, feels a little bit like Christmas. Something else that we and you guys are doing is actually going to happen around Christmas. And that is that we officially announced, and the UFHL officially announced, the Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors.
Dean, the UFWJ, Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors. Can't wait for this franchise auction on November 20th and 21st. The draft will be on December 19th, which is right around when the 10 countries finalize their rosters. Of course, mirroring the real world, there's only 10 franchises available, $500 minimum bid, a 25-man roster, Dean. And this is something that we're still discussing as far as rule book goes, but do you have a potential for protected lists for futures so you sort of secure the rights for guys that are going to be in future tournaments? Because this group that will be playing in the 2022 World Junior Tournament this winter, will mostly be 2002 born players. Largely guys that were drafted in 2020 and 2021, but we have the scouts already own prospects all the way out to 2024. We're looking at doing U18 tournaments in the future, but do these World Junior franchises, are they able to have something of a 5 or 10 man protected list of guys they want to build around for their future when those players, 15 and 16-year-olds, eventually become World Junior players? It also opens up the door for a lot more trade activity and transactions in the off season from the UFWJ, because it's only a 2-week tournament. Then you have the rest of the year to reshape your roster prior to the start of the next year's tournament. So adding some protected lists of some sort there definitely allows for more wiggle room, and certainly allows for the revenue stream for the scouts. Of course, only the players that are involved in that year's tournament are generating revenue for the scouts, but just knowing that there's franchises that have the rights to players in the future will be big as well. But certainly the scouts are excited about the revenue stream. Players would be paid out based on their percentage of fantasy points. Whoever registered the player or has the player's gameplay contract would get the percentage of fantasy points they contribute. And then last but not least, Dean, just the opportunity to brand your own country, including creating your own flag, I think is a real fun and interesting aspect to the UFWJ. So we're very excited. Like I said, it's crazy to think it's October 1st already today, Dean, and Christmas will be here before you know it. That franchise auction on November 20th will be here before we know it as well.
Yeah, this is so cool. We all sit around and think about the ultimate World Junior team. We've probably all done that, of the all-time greatest World Junior teams, and you don't even get me started on the potential of maybe a World Junior Legends League down the road, because that just blows my mind. But this is really, really awesome. And I'll be honest, me and my buddies have already started talking about what our country will be called if we are successful in buying one of these teams, because I think this is a really, really neat aspect. And, you can have... a lot of times we get so focused on Canada. And, in Canada, a lot of guys are one and done with a World Junior team. But in a lot of other countries, guys play 2 or even 3 years. Sometimes, and I don't know if a guy's ever played 4. Maybe it's out there. But there are other guys in other countries that play 2 or 3 years. You will get 2 or 3 years out of some of these players. Don't get so Canadian, North American focused on the guys that play once and then are gone. The guys that get to play multiple years are like the Bedards and the Wright that we're going to be able to see. But there are guys from other countries that will play multiple years.
It is the Dynasty League, Dean. That's the important thing. It's not just a one-off single season league. It's a Dynasty League. So you're drafting these players, and then there will be an annual draft every year, Dean, to fill your empty spots. So if you have a Bedard who you know is going to play at least 3 years in the World Juniors, then you draft him as your franchise player or whatever. But then as the other guys, the Quentin Byfields and those guys, graduate and move on, then you're going to replace them in a draft the following years. So it'll be interesting to see that strategy, Dean. And also, if you incorporate those futures, especially if it's a wide open draft and you can draft them in the early rounds and fill your future spots early or late, that's going to add a lot of intrigue too. What kind of franchises are going to build for this year's tournament? What ones are going to build for the future? But either way, Dean, you will own every player that's in this year's World Juniors will be owned by those 10 franchises. With that 25-man active roster, those will be filled by players that are in this year's tournament. So when that fourth liner from Austria scores a goal, that's going to help one of these 10 franchises. So that's the really important part, is every player that's in the World Juniors will have value in the UFWJ, but also you could take, Macklin Celebrini or Aaron Kitty Harju in the first round if you wanted, even though they're probably 2 to 3 years away from making a World Juniors, and stash them on your list. But you're passing up, if you take them in the early rounds, if we go this route, then you're passing up one of your 25-man roster spots that you'll have to make up for in the later rounds, and somebody else is going to grab another player who's going to be more impactful in the present. So there's a lot of ways to go about the roster construction and the protected lists to allow for a lot more transactions, because again, it is only a 2-week tournament, and then you have the entire year to sort of get your roster in place for the following season. So we do think you'll see some good activity in the offseason. And then, Dean, $500 USD minimum bid is obviously lower than we've done for other franchise auctions, but there's only 10 franchises available ever. This is it. There's only 10 World Junior franchises on the UFFS platform. So I think supply versus demand, I think you're going to see some bidding wars for those 10 franchises.
Indeed. Very, very exciting. Speaking of exciting, the Kryptonites, they got it done on Innovation Island last weekend with the scavenger hunt, and they have been rewarded with the first Maplewood jersey.
Another very exciting partnership, Dean, with Maplewood Hockey, based in Swift Current, Saskatchewan. Dallas and his team there, they do amazing jerseys, NHL caliber jerseys, as you can see from the graphic. The UFHL franchises can start ordering themselves jerseys of their franchise for Christmas, but the Kryptonites are getting a gift. So as we're sticking with the Christmas theme, Merry Christmas to the Kryptonites and Charisse Schulz. And Dean, actually, I was hoping to have a reveal on the show today. Who are the Kryptonites going to name and number for the jersey, like we did with the previous winner? But with Cameron Turner and the North Stars, they obviously took Jason Robertson and number 21. And that jersey's been made by another company, Dean, and that one's in the mail. But this will be the first one from Maplewood Hockey, our official jersey supplier. But the Kryptonites, Dean, are still deciding on name and number, and they weren't ready to reveal today for today's show. Talking back and forth with Charisse, her initial instinct, as soon as I asked, she was going Mark Giordano, because she's a big Flames fan, and he meant so much to the Flames organization, longtime captain in Calgary. But when she thought about it some more and consulting with her husband, Arlo Schulz, they have three names they're debating, because obviously Mark Stone's such a big face of the franchise for the Kryptonites, as well as Roman Josie. But one name that I don't think we'll see on the Kryptonites jersey, Dean, is Taylor Hall, and we'll have more on that later. But don't expect Taylor Hall to be the face of the franchise for this inaugural or first ever Maplewood jersey for the Kryptonites.
All right. Well, I look forward to those details, but I do know a lot of details have taken place and a lot of changes have taken place for the upcoming season. So for the owners that have been living under a rock, here is one recap of all the changes that have taken place, and we'll start with some scoring changes.
And Dean, I think this is important for anybody that's watching, just to see like how these leagues evolve from year to year. I counted up the changes, Dean. I believe there's 22 changes for the upcoming season. And that's with, I would say, the vast majority of franchises are very happy with the league, very happy with the gameplay, fully enjoying the experience. Yet there's still 20-ish tweaks that you make from one season to the next. And these are early days. This is going into our first full 82-game season, although it is season 3. So I think it'll level off a bit in the years to come, and there won't be as much appetite for change. But certainly one thing, Dean, is any change to the value of a scoring category must be done gradually over 3 seasons. So there are some scoring category changes, but they're not done all at once. So it's not going to impact your roster that much one way or the other. Block shots is one new category. Fights and penalties drawn are also the new categories that are coming in. Plus, minus, and penalty minutes are being lowered from their current value. So both are going from 0.5 down to 0.25. So those are some of the scoring category changes. And then going into the other changes, Dean, there's just been a lot of talk throughout the offseason about roster changes, roster sizes, and dressing 7 defensemen and 11 forwards. That was pretty unanimous. All the franchises wanted to mirror the real world, because that happens where you can dress 6 and 12 or 7 and 11. Waivers now open starting today, Dean, October 1st, 12 days before opening night on October 12th. The playoff format was one of the biggest changes, I think, coming out of the off-season owners meetings. Franchises are now allowed to pick players off the franchise they defeat in their series to fill any empty roster spots. So if you advance, you go back to your opponent and you take whichever players advanced in the NHL to fill your empty roster spots. All players, Dean, will only be paid for the rounds that they are active. So if they lose out in the first round of the NHL playoffs and they're still they were on your fantasy roster or your UFHL roster, and you advance to the second round, you don't have to pay those players that aren't contributing anything to the second round. They don't get paid in the second round. And all players, Dean, will be paid based on their percentage of fantasy points contributed. So your fourth liners aren't going to make as much ROI or leasing revenue as your go-to face of the franchise or first-line players. So that tiering system is also new. So quite a bit of an overhaul to the playoff system, and it was pretty unanimous that franchises wanted to go in this direction. And personally, I think it's better for the league, the new playoff system as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, especially as we're getting players involved in being as realistic as possible. So I think that was something that we did that was very, very smart, a smart decision. And I also think the way we're going with the league awards is really great, and especially because we have some terrific sponsors on board.
Absolutely, Dean. And then obviously the sponsored awards, we have the Elite Prospects Players of the Week, Players of the Month, the Fanalytica Rookie of the Month, the Puckpedia GM of the Year, and our newest sponsor or partner, the Maplewood Social Media Award. And the plan there, Dean, we're talking about is this goes to the franchise that puts in the most effort for promoting the league, the most active on social media, and obviously the best promotion of the league. Decided by the competition committee, but they're likely to receive a free Maplewood jersey of their franchise to further incentivize, that marketing from the franchises of the league to the masses, right? So all these awards are $5 worth of SEO, $5 USD worth of SEO, but for the Maplewood Social Media Award, the franchise that does the best job on social promoting the league will also likely get a Maplewood jersey for free as part of that award. And then, Dean, just in general with the awards, like I said, the biggest change here is we're going from whatever the NHL would do for 3 stars or the Hart Trophy or whatever. We're awarding UFHL fantasy points are going to determine our awards, which is so important. Obviously, the Hart Trophy, each franchise submits a list of 5 candidates. The league tallies them up. The player that appeared on the most lists is the winner. If there's a tie, the franchises will vote amongst those candidates that were tied. And then some new awards too, Dean, which is always fun. The Jennings Award in the NHL, which goes to the best goaltending tandem, that's coming to the UFHL. It'll have a new name. A Defensive Defender Award, which encompasses hits, blocks, plus, minus, and takeaways, is being added, as well as an Enforcer Award, hits, fights, and penalty minutes. And all these awards, Dean, just when you thought the voting was done for the offseason, there's more voting to come because we have to decide on the names of all the new awards and all the awards in general, because the Norris Trophy, the Vezina Trophy, they're all going to get new UFHL specific names. Yourself submitted a lot of really good name options. We've had some other ones come in. So there's still one more round of voting at some point here to name these awards that'll be associated with the UFHL.
Awesome. I can't wait to see who skips the vote this time. Okay, so having said that, there were other things that were voted on, including some changes to the auction.
Yeah, Dean, last but not least, the auction changes. The 64th pick, which has been a hot button topic in the entry draft auction, our version of the NHL draft, the minimum bid is raised from 25 USD to 40 USD. And in the entry auction and the futures auction, so the big franchise event and the big scouting event, the minimum bids are raised from 5 USD to 10 USD, just to try to expedite the auction process a bit, get the bidding going a little faster by increasing those minimums. But all in all, Dean, another successful offseason for the UFHL. It sounds like a lot of change, but a lot of it is subtle change. And I think from the outside looking in, or from my perspective, without having a vote, I really like the direction the franchises are taking the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, it's in the early stages, really. Leagues have a lot of change in the early going, and then they settle out. So I think ultimately that's what we will do, and we have graduated changes where they come in over a 3-year process. So I think the great minds in this league really came together, and they'll have to remember these important dates as we start forward, including today. It's crazy. Today is an important date for UFHL teams.
Yeah, Dean, the hockey world really, as you mentioned, everything ramps up come October. Today's October 1st. Technically in the NHL, actually, Dean, waivers opened yesterday on September 30th, was day one of waivers. In the UFHL, day one of waivers is today. So if you wanted to get any players down to your protected list before submitting your roster earlier on in the process, you could start getting them through waivers today. The way it works, Dean, is once they clear waivers, the date they clear, they're exempt for 30 days. So if you waive them today, they clear tomorrow, they're exempt into the season, but you would lose that from October 2nd to October 12th, 10 days. So they'd only be exempt for 20 days of the season instead of 30. So that's the downside to waiving them early. The upside is maybe you think they're going to break out in the preseason and you want to get them down to your protected list before anybody else takes notice of that player and puts in a claim. So it'll be interesting to see in the real world, Dean. The reason obviously why waivers start early is people actually have to move their families from an NHL city to an AHL city and get settled and get ready for training camp. And there's all the real world logistics. So I think in the UFHL, the vast majority will be like last year, where there's a big waivers dump on October 10th is the waivers deadline for preseason waivers deadline, Dean. All players requiring waivers must be declared to the commissioner or the waiver wire group by 3 p.m. Eastern on October 10th. So the way this works, Dean, is if there's a waiver eligible player and you want them on your protected list, they have to be declared for that by October 10th at 3 p.m. because they need that 24-hour auction in order for another franchise to claim them and get them on their opening night roster, which is October 11th at 9 p.m. Eastern is the roster deadline. 23-man opening night rosters must be submitted to the commissioner via email. So that does allow you can claim a player and win a waivers auction on the afternoon and have them in your opening night roster in the evening. And then looking long-term, Dean, the trade deadline has been set mirroring the NHL on March 21st. Last day of the regular season will be April 29th this year, and May 2nd will be the first day or the opening of the Klein Cup playoffs.
All right, revving up the machine again, as we do here in the UFHL. And that means that there's a lot more trade talk. You know, as the talk in the offseason kind of filters through, it kind of speeds up. And now people are like, oh, we didn't get what we needed to do, so let's get aggressive here. Or maybe you just change your mind as you see training camps opening. But certainly a lot of trade talk going on right now, and some interesting players on the board.
Yeah, a lot of talk, not as much action this past week. It's kind of been going in waves here, Dean. We had the calm before the storm with no trades. Then last week we had a flurry with 5 trades. And this week we've had no trades so far. Knock on wood. They could be coming this weekend, especially with some of the names that are out there. Like you said, you look at the UFHL trade block or trade bait board. The Kryptonites, who we mentioned, Dean, early on in the show as the jersey giveaway, they're now listening to offers on Taylor Hall, the 2018 NHL MVP, signed a $6 million 4-year extension at $6 million cap hit with the Boston Bruins. He's probably going to be a second liner there just because we know how stacked Boston is, but certainly an impact player for Boston when he got there, and they were really happy with what Taylor Hall brought. And $6 million seems like a reasonable number. That's same as his last contract prior to the $8 million in Buffalo. So Kryptonites are listening to offers on Taylor Hall nonetheless. So like I said, don't expect his name on a Kryptonites jersey this season. The Assassins, Dean, are looking to move one of Brock Nelson, Nino Niederreiter, or Riley Smith. And there's some interesting things here, Dean, is that Brock Nelson has the exact same contract as Taylor Hall, $6 million cap hit for 4 years. So who do you want, Taylor Hall or Brock Nelson? Both those guys are on the trade bait board at the exact same contract or the exact same term. And then the other two are almost identical too. Nino Niederreiter and Riley Smith. Niederreiter's at 5.25 and Riley Smith is at $5 million. Both of them are pending UFAs entering a contract year. They want to get one more big contract. So it's a big year for those two guys, but it's interesting how Nelson and Hall have the same contract. Niederreiter and Smith almost have the same deal. Which ones of those 4 players, potentially move, this coming week? And then the Yetis, Dean, are kicking around the idea of moving Mackenzie Blackwood, a goaltender who's on the rise, $2.8 million for 2 years, a quality goaltending, young goaltender, 24 years old. But the issue here, Dean, is he's one of those rare unvaccinated players in the NHL. There are some travel concerns with coming to Canada, although he's in New Jersey, so he won't have a ton of games in Canada, and not before December, I believe. But still, it's something that has made the Yetis pretty open to options, is what they said. So their goaltending might not be solidified as it seemed to be when Scott Lowater sort of said they put the finishing touches on the roster there, and they were within 3,000 of the cap ceiling, and now they're looking at maybe tinkering one more time with their goaltending situation if they can find the right fit there. But Dean, this is the roster deadline is 1 week from Monday, so we're entering the final week to wheel and deal as far as finalizing that opening night roster.
You know, it's so interesting, and I'll just speak personally. When I look at Taylor Hall and the 4 years at $6 million, I think that's a great contract. Brock Nelson, $6 million for 4 years. You know, for me, I just look at it as you're just getting such good value out of the plus minus for Taylor Hall. So I think I might have to go that. You know how big of a plus minus guy I am in that regard. But in all seriousness, $6 million for a guy who's going to play on one of the best second lines after, the matchups that Taylor Hall is going to get in Boston, because that first line, I think Taylor Hall is in the best position right now he's ever been in his NHL career from a fantasy perspective. He might not be on the first line, but Boston's second line is going to be better than some teams' first line. I know he lost some of the chemistry that he built up last year, but I still think it's going to be great. I apologize, they're mowing the lawn right outside, so you might have heard that. But I think that's great value for Taylor Hall. Really, I do.
And you're right, Dean. The lost chemistry with David Krejci going back to the Czech Republic is going to be the big question mark there. Charlie Coyle, I believe, is hurt to start the season as well. So like Jack Stadnicka might be filling in at second line center, and then you got guys like Jake DeBrusk and Craig Smith. So it'll be interesting to see how that Boston second line chemistry works out. But you're right. I think anytime Taylor Hall can be the second wave for a franchise, because in Edmonton, he was expected to be the go-to guy. Mm-hmm. In Buffalo, obviously, Jack Eichel and him were supposed to be the 1-2 punch. Now he can play sort of in the shadows a little bit. And I do think that helps Taylor Hall certainly put up a lot more points playing behind Brad Marchand. So that'll be interesting to see what the Kryptonites do there if anything materializes. And not every player that ends up on the trade bait board moves. As we saw, right. Brock Besser's name was out there for a month or so. He hasn't moved, and Brandon Tanev's been on the trade bait board for a year now with the Royals, and he hasn't moved. So it's not a guarantee that any of these players are moving, but certainly there's enough names out there on that trade bait board that makes us think we'll have something to talk about on the trade front this time next week, Dean.
Every time I see Brandon Tanev on the trade bait board, I think of that gif of the woman from the Titanic where she's like, it's been 80 years. It's like Brandon Tanev is just permanently on the trade bait board. So it's quite funny. Now, I talk to people all the time about this league and how realistic it is, and saying you have to be proactive and reactive almost at the same time. You have to have your roster prepared for a guy who's going to get a big raise, and then you have to be able to react to that if you can't fit him in. And this happened a lot this summer. That's why we ended up with Dougie Hamilton, and there's more guys that are going to have to be reactive, but I think a lot of these franchises have been preparing for this.
They have, Dean, and Brady Tkachuk is the one outlier still for the Ice Vikings. Not much news on him coming out of Ottawa yet, but the Vancouver tandem, or the Vancouver dynamic duo of Elias Patterson and Quinn Hughes, by all accounts, Patterson's taking a 3-year deal. Quinn's getting the longer term at 6 years. I plugged in the numbers here, Dean. I don't think they're confirmed yet as we're speaking, but they're expected to be in that $7.7 million annual average value cap hit for the UFHL. And I think both the Warriors with Elias Patterson and Red Army with Quinn Hughes are probably happy with that $7.7 or $7.75 million cap hit, because there was also talk that either one of them could get up, the young defensemen, including Cale Makar and Miro Heiskanen, were up in that $9 million range, Darnell Nurse, etc. And then obviously young forwards, you look at guys like Mitch Marner and Braden Point at 9.5. And, a lot of people thought Elias Patterson was going to go higher. But he got slightly more money than Andrei Svechnikov in Carolina, but Svechnikov obviously took the term. Elias Pettersson is going to get paid in 3 years if he develops as everybody expects. But I would say that's good news for both the Warriors and Red Army. They were probably budgeting, like you said, Dean, for that $9 million. They would have been surprised if it was over 10. They would have been thrilled if it was under 8. So I think they're going to be happy with those contracts. And obviously Vancouver's happy to have those two players hopefully in the lineup for the last couple preseason games and ready to go on opening night. The other cool story from the week, Dean, where there was a trade in the NHL impacting Kamikaze and the Yetis in the UFHL, but Logan Brown of Kamikaze was traded to his hometown St. Louis Blues. Logan Brown was the 11th overall pick in the 2016 draft. Big centerman, hasn't had a big opportunity in the NHL yet. We'll see if he gets it with his hometown team, in exchange for Zach Sanford of the Blues, who very much is going to fit with DJ Smith's coaching style there in Ottawa as another rugged power forward type guy. So Zach Sanford from the Yetis on his way to Ottawa. And then again, going back to the vaccinated status question mark here, Dean, is Travis Hamonic has yet to report to Vancouver's camp. All sorts of rumors that he's going to sit out the year, which today's the deadline to to sit out the year if he's not going to play. After that, he'd have to honor his contract, but there's also rumors he might want to be traded to an American market where obviously he can travel a lot more freely in the U.S. and move about. And I wonder if that Travis Hamonic decision is related to the sudden traction or announcement that Patterson and Hughes are going to get paid, whether that means Hamonic's sitting out, possibly even retiring. But I think that the likelihood is that potentially traded to a U.S. market. And they haven't really come out and said why he's not unvaccinated. I know his family has some issues with immunocompromised, his wife and daughter. So it was surprising that he was unvaccinated, but obviously there's some reasoning there. And then the last but not least, the Blades of Steel. Jacob Verana was the bad news on the injury front this week. He requires shoulder surgery, and he's going to miss 4+ months, which likely means LTIR for the Blades of Steel forward. And then, Dean, I guess that wasn't last. Last is Sami Vatanen of the Snipers. He's headed overseas to Switzerland. He's going to play in the NL. So Sami Vatanen is out of the NHL for the coming season. So the Snipers have had a bit of a tough offseason with Jack Eichel and Carey Price and a lot of their players. Eric Stahl still hasn't signed anywhere. Is he retiring, or what's Eric Stahl's plan? So there's been a lot of uncertainty surrounding the Snipers roster, and now Sami Vatanen will be remaining on their protected list. They'll keep his rights whether he retires or stays in Europe, but certainly a bit of a surprise that Sami Vatanen couldn't find an NHL job for this season.
Yeah, and now the Blades of Steel will have to learn the ins and outs of LTIR, as was discussed on the UFHL GM's chat, because it cost one person their job last year. You want to make sure you know everything, and it is up to the franchise. It's their responsibility, as we always know. All right, Larry, 12 sleeps, and the season will be upon us. Can't wait. Some really exciting stuff happening, particularly with Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors and, of course, the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League. Thanks as always, Larry.
Thanks, Dean. Looking forward to a busy last week prior to the roster deadline. So looking forward to seeing what we have to talk about next week. I don't think it's going to be a quiet week in the UFHL.
You're watching the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. UFSN, your one-stop fantasy shop. Get in touch on Twitter at UFS Network. Email us, ufsn@uffsports.com.
All right, another jam-packed edition of the Insider segment with UFHL Insider Larry Fisher. And that is just about going to wrap things up, but we do have the duck call. So this is not a ranting one, as they have been in the past, but I just want to actually congratulate everybody involved in the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League as we enter Season 3, and our first full season, keep in mind. Let's hope it's a full season anyway. So congratulations to owners, to GMs, to assistant GMs, to scouts, and especially to those who make this league tick, Andrea, Nathan, and Larry. The three-headed monster that takes care of this league, and I have to say, makes it run very, very smoothly. They have led us into year 3 that starts in 12 sleeps, and this is an awesome league full of passionate people, opinionated, passionate people, and that's great. We might not all get along, and that's okay. If we can agree on the main and important things, that not just for the good of the league that I like to preach about a lot, but for the good of the platform as a whole. This is something that is so much bigger and than just a fantasy league. And while that is what it is at its core, a fantasy league on the blockchain, there are so many layers. This is like the biggest onion you've ever seen, but instead of tears from the onion, you're going to be tears of happiness because you're going to be more profitable and hopefully happier, even if our fantasy teams don't bring us the prize pool, because ultimately I think you will be looking at right now you're going to be looking at, we need prize pool, we want prize pool to win. There's going to be so many other ways to get some return on this investment that you've invested a lot of time and money in, because trust me, I know how much time it takes to run one of these teams. So we're billing ourselves as high stakes fantasy. Right now, when everybody getting paid, which I thought was the right decision in the beginning, and I've totally changed my mind, because once the light bulb goes on for you in the UFHL, something clicks and you really, really buy in the UFS platform in general. But what I'm looking at is prize money is going to be great, but we need to make that prize money go to only the playoff teams. If we want to bill ourselves as high stakes fantasy, then it should be just the playoff teams. Having said that, like I said earlier, there are going to be so many different ways that franchises will be able to make some ROI, be active and get out there, whether that's from merchandising, whether that's from our betting, whether it's the DeFi. There are smarter people than me that can explain it, that will tell you some great ways in all of our sports that you will be able to not just have fun playing fantasy, but be profitable. If you're active and you're involved, it is out there. So good luck to everybody as you shape your rosters in the next 12 days and have a terrific season. That is going to wrap things up for another episode. So many great things going on. Andy McNamara has the Legends League in football happening very soon. Alex LeBlanc just launched the Basketball Ultimate Fantasy Basketball Association. And, of course, we have baseball franchise auctions in November 5th to 7th. So if you want to get in on something else than just hockey, there are so many different ways. Big thanks to Larry Fisher for joining me on the program, as he usually does, and bringing the goods about the greatest fantasy hockey league out there, and that's why we cover it in this way. Some great things are happening. Some changes will be happening. I think you're all going to really, really love it. Thanks very much for tuning in. Have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy preseason hockey.
UFHL Now is produced by DM Productions. To get in touch, head to www.podcastalley.ca.